Hey, thanks for coming to another episode of Barry T's Garage with Ed Smith answering your questions. So as you are asking Ed, I'll ask Ed and we'll see what he has for us today. So, hey Ed, good to see you again today.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Nice warm Arizona afternoon.
Yeah, nice to be inside.
Yeah.
The air conditioner's on.
That is
not
so
outside.
good. That's right.
Yeah.
We're very thankful for that. I'm going to start off with some engine questions. You know a few things about engines.
Okay, we'll try.
Okay.
See what happens. Yeah.
Someone asked a really great question because I didn't know what the answer. I want to know what you say. They asked, what is Ed's favorite engine to work on?
My favorite one is probably the Flathead.
Is that right? The Ford Flathead?
Flathead. I've been working on them since my first car I bought was a 36 Ford I bought when I was 15.
Okay.
So then I overhauled that motor when I was probably 16 years old. And it took me all winter to overhaul it because I took it in the basement of my dad's or parents' house down the basement.
Did you?
And I cleaned it, I remember, with steel wool. So I had no idea how much steel wool I used or how dirty it was and put it all together.
Okay.
So it's been kind of a challenge from that time on. I never raced that motor. It was but anyways, the 36 Ford I bought when I was 15 years old, I still have it.
Yeah.
That's the red car.
Just so I can interrupt right there. For those of you who want to know more about Ed's first car that he still has, we did a video on that car.
Yeah.
That 36 Ford. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's been redone. Ed's built the whole thing over again. And so if you want to see that, cue up that video.
Yeah. But now it's got a Chevy motor in it, 383 with disc brakes and 700 automatic transmission, overdrive, and new interior and everything. It drives super.
Yeah.
Lowered a little bit longer, and disc brakes and different suspension on it. So it really drives nice now. So the Flathead, I keep working on it all my whole life. People bring them once in a while, and they're quite interesting, but a challenge. I think that the Chevy motors, I love the Chevy motor because everybody else does too.
Yeah.
And we race that in our race cars all the time. Did different things to them, and we found out some things that we did different than anybody else. And I think that even back in 60, must have been 1970, one of the guys here in town, Lealand McSpadden, I think, I'll talk to him this next Tuesday, I think.
Okay.
And at that time, he was outlawed from Manzanita Speedway for rough driving.
Oh, yeah.
So I think they threw him out for a month or so, and so he says, okay, next year we'll build you a car, a super modified car, single 4-barrel Chevy motor, and then you just come to the races with your helmet, and we'll be there every time. So with that car, we did some different things in it that nobody else did to the car, to the engines.
Okay.
And many nights, the next year that car would have been number one because we won the car championship that year.
Oh, wow.
It was a single 4-barrel car, but we run trophy dash, main event, and heat race, all three every night.
Really?
For many times, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of runs.
I have some pictures of that car too.
Yeah.
And the next year we'd won all those races, and somebody came from Alaska and wanted to buy a good car, and we sold that car, and I went to Alaska. But that was Chevy. So with that, again, I think my favorite motor that we changed different things and 3 carburetors and all kinds of stuff, and they're pretty simple, but they're hard to get. It's just a challenge part of it. The Chevy motor is not much of a challenge.
It's too easy, right?
Yeah, it's too easy.
Okay.
And they tear them apart, and they're all the same.
Now, you were telling me earlier today about a customer that came in with a real old mess, kind of a rusted up one, I guess.
Yes.
Sometimes it can be a real difficult thing to get apart when they're...
This guy came from up north, drove down the other day, and an older guy, and he brought his motor with him.
Uh-huh.
He didn't call me or anything, but he brought his motor with him. He come walk in the shop, and I never seen him before.
Uh-huh.
He said, I come down here to talk to you about this motor, and he brought it. We went out and looked at it, and it was so crusty from rust.
Ooh.
But that motor was a 52 motor, and had 4 sleeves in one side of the motor.
Wow.
So then, one of the sleeves had a big crack in it, and it was so rusty. I told him it's not worth cleaning up with the sleeves and what it would cost to recondition it and stuff.
Right.
So I told him it's not. You can't do that.
Yeah, there's a point where it's just not worth it. Yeah.
So there's a danger of getting it done. You're doing a lot of machine work, and then you come down. It was a failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our cars back in those, talking about racing that modified car.
Yeah.
And we had in those days in 1971 and 2, we did a lot of research for total seal rings.
Uh-huh.
They first came to town here, and I had a good friend of mine who worked for him. And he had a sprint car, and we worked on that sprint car, but and we had total seal rings. So we really still like total seal rings.
That's amazing. I had no idea they went back that long.
Yeah, they're made up in town here.
Is that right?
Up at the airport, maybe about 15 miles north of here.
No kidding.
And they're a huge company now, and one of the guys there that I talked to the other day has been working for Keith Jones. He's been working for 28 years.
Wow.
And I knew him when he worked at one of the Chevy dealers here in town. And our sprint cars that we race and our things here, our modified cars, we always had total seal rings in them.
No kidding.
Even when we went Boone and if we wanted to build it. They're not a cheap ring, but they're the best ring you could possibly buy.
Wow, that's a big endorsement for a record holder winning race car, man.
Yes.
That's awesome. So the follow-up question was, what's an engine pre-1960, so older version of engines, that you find is very difficult and you don't really like to work on? Is there something that comes to mind?
Some of them we never worked on very much. There's a Studebaker motor, even there's a 289, but it looked more like a Cadillac motor. The Cadillac intake almost fit on it, but didn't.
Okay.
But we never worked on that motor very much, even though there was in some of those Golden Hawks with a supercharger on
That's
them.
right.
And a belt-driven supercharger, and they were pretty fast cars.
They were fast cars.
Yeah. We didn't work on very much.
And I guess that's the thing, if you work on something a lot, even if it's kind of a complicated thing, you know what to do.
Yeah, you still want to know what to do.
Yeah. Whereas if it's something you barely work on, now it's a big question.
You have to take your time and slow so you don't break something.
Yep.
You get it apart, because they all come apart. Somebody put it together. If they put it together, we can get it apart.
Right.
Somehow.
There's someone had a machining question I thought was a good one. This guy named Andrew said, I have a question for Ed. Back when you weren't, if you're not fortunate enough to have access to all the fancy machinery, is there any kind of a simple way to balance the assemblies on an engine?
No, not really.
Okay.
You could take a gram scale. And the only people that had gram scales was the drugstore.
Okay.
So if you're familiar with the drugstore and you spend a lot of time with the drugstore, he might let you borrow his machine.
Okay.
but that's not common.
No, not
common.
But
you could take a drugstore with gram scale
and
weigh all the pistons and the rods and do something, but there's no way you could turn the crankshaft to spin it like balance a tire.
Right. You need some kind of
you need some kind of a
machine,
electronic devices or something on there. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, next question. Someone named Mike was asking, and I don't even know if you probably do know, but have you ever messed with the Ardun heads on a flathead?
No, I never have.
Okay.
They were expensive, and I never knew anybody that in my life that had some here in town or something that somebody could afford to have them.
Yeah.
It was usually the California people had them, and I think probably very few had those that were even in Chicago or back east anywhere.
Right.
But mainly it was always a California thing.
Yeah. Now the very little line
with Isky camshafts, and those guys have been in business for 100 years, I think.
Yeah. And they change how the airflow moves in the flathead, don't they?
Yes, yeah, they did, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about them, but I just vaguely...
I've seen some weird stuff on flathead Fords.
Yeah.
And I've seen some really weird stuff, and so I don't know. There's many companies that made some odd things for flathead. Intakes and cylinder heads. And
do you have a brand people want to know? What's Ed's favorite brand of engine oil? People want to know what you like.
We've used Quaker State oil.
Okay.
For a long time. We loved that. I look back at it. We did have some camshafts that went flat.
Yeah.
Even back in the early 60s.
Okay.
And even Millings had a camshaft that said you have to use chilled iron lifters with it. That was a different name. I don't know what that meant. We just, if it said use them, we used them.
Yeah.
And then the cams didn't go flat, but somehow if you used a steel lifter on that particular camshaft, it would go flat.
No kidding. Huh.
So we had to be careful with that. So we did have some problems with flat lifters back then. It's not necessarily is it just being on the last few years like it is now.
Right.
And the oils, of course, our oils has changed totally.
Right.
From and the gasoline, they took the oil out of the gasoline.
Right.
That was a big thing, oil.
So if someone's asking for a modern take, that's for Lake Speed Jr. to talk about.
Yeah, I would call him.
Yeah, well, I
and I'll call him some of these days and ask him,
Yeah, right. That's a good idea.
That was Gibbs oil.
Right,
Lake
right.
Speed works for Total Seal now.
Yeah, but he
And
was
I
with
think,
Gibbs Racing.
If he was going to hire somebody that knows a lot about engineering and technology and different things, well, there's only one guy that I know of you could ask any questions at Lake Speed.
Yeah. Now, what about different oils for an old classic car, like an old car?
I would stick to 30-weight oil.
Okay.
Yeah, just a non-detergent oil.
Okay.
Detergent soap. And our first old motors, I think I said that once before, that the foreign cars, they cast their motors one day and then honed them out and put them in the car the next day. And they were coarse like a sponge. And then if you use non-detergent oil where there's no soap in it, then the cylinder walls become black.
Really?
From dirt. And it filled all the pores in that cylinder. But then, and it worked fine. Didn't use any oil at all.
Yeah.
But if you put detergent oil, a quart of detergent oil, and run it, it cleaned all those pores off. And then it used oil like a pig.
Oh, interesting.
It would use a quart of oil every 5 miles.
Wow. Wow.
And then the American cars, they would cast the motors and let them sit out in the field and rust for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And rust those molecules together. And then when they honed it, they had a good tight surface.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what people mentioned, they call it seasoning, right?
That's right, exactly right. I used to go to Detroit, and there's a whole field out there of gray motors stacked up 20 high, and they were all out there being rusted.
Interesting.
And then, of course, we got the new motors with the new sleeves and stuff that are made high quality, aluminum motors and big bore, and there's all kinds of different things you hone the motor with, diamond things, and the grooves you make when you hone a motor, what you hone it with, and all kinds of this. All new technology to match up with the rings.
Right. Yeah, the cylinder walls and the rings have to play together.
The whole thing has rings, cylinder walls, and pistons.
Sure.
And that makes the combination.
Yeah.
And you should have it all right.
Right. Okay. Next oil question real quick. We're going to go through a few of them here. Why would you change oils or type specs as a car ages? When a car gets older, let's say an engine's getting tired, would you change to a heavier oil to help an older engine carry on? Or
it possibly depends on what you're going to do with the motor.
Okay.
Where are you going to drive it? Are you going to drive it daily?
Yeah.
Or are you going to set it for a couple of months and drive it again?
Okay.
And I would go back to some other oil companies made of it. Gibbs had an oil.
Okay.
And he was, go back to Gibbs a little bit. He had trouble with NASCAR. And so he started doing all kinds of research. I think the oil companies, he maybe sent them, I don't know how many, thousands and thousands, $100,000 worth of used parts. And they kept diagnosis and doing it, so they come up with some oils.
Oh, okay.
And then the one oil was a military oil. They said this is a brand, not a brand, but a mixture of oil for Jeep.
Huh.
It was for a Jeep that you let it set for 4 or 5 years, and then you start up and ran it.
Oh.
So it was a military oil, a mixture.
Okay.
So that took care of the moisture.
Okay.
That Jeep would not cause moisture in the valve covers.
Right.
So that oil dissipated the water. So right now we would call that hot rod oil.
Okay.
That's something you drive your car for. So I don't let it set for 3 or 4 months. And other than that, with the regular oil, you take the breather off, it's full of moisture.
Yeah.
So then stuff starts to rust under the valve covers. With this oil, it would stop doing that.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's a good oil to do that. After that, it's whatever you use the motor on.
Yeah.
The application and how often you use it, you need to choose the right oil.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, going to maybe a more modern situation, do you have any comments on how often to change oil?
We used to change the oil in 1950s and 60s every 1,000 miles.
Okay.
And we changed the filter every other time.
Okay.
Every 2,000 miles. And it's just normal. But now, some of these dealers that are trying to advertise, you don't have to change for 5,000 miles.
Yeah.
Well, the people right now, I think they forget about it. And they even forget about how many miles they have on it.
Right.
Pretty soon you find one that hasn't changed the oil in it for 20,000 miles.
Right.
I would change the oil every 3,000.
That's your favorite number?
Just to keep it. Don't cost that much.
Right.
Buy oil
for the small amount of money, just
for a small amount of
play
money,
it safe.
It's just cheap.
Yeah.
guarantee.
Okay.
And then you get a motor that would last a couple 100,000 miles.
Okay. All right, this is my last question on the oils. If you're sending out an older rebuild engine, by older I mean an old small block Chevy or a Flathead or one of those type vintage engines, what is your recommendation for break-in procedures?
Oh, we still use break-in oil.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, we do. And it's got some more zinc in it.
Okay.
And it's got some more molecules and silicone or worms that makes it slippery.
Okay.
Yeah. So you need a little bit more slippery stuff, and there's some additives you can put in there too.
Okay.
Several companies make additives, and it's just like a STP or something, and makes everything slippery and it breaks in a little easier.
Okay.
So it's all good.
And then how long would they drive it on the break-in oil before?
You can drive whatever you want. 500 miles or 1,000 miles, that's all okay.
It's okay.
Ain't gonna hurt nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Very
even
good.
in the 1959, 60s when STP came out, some of our customers that was we put a can of motor additive, STP, brand new car. We put some in the engine, some of the automatic transmission, and some on the rear end. When the car was brand new.
Okay.
Because that's what he wanted.
Okay.
Then off it went, and it lasted for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, some of those motors ran,
All right. I got a group of questions here I put together. Different people ask about carburation. Okay. First question is, what's your favorite, if you can generalize, between the 1 4-barrel, the dual quad, or the 3 Deuce setups? What do you think about those things?
I've had many cars with 2 4-barrels.
Okay.
Because it runs on a 2-barrel.
Right.
Then as you push the gas pedal down, it turns into 2 2-barrels.
Right.
The front of that carburetor and the front of the next one.
Okay.
So that gets you up to a certain miles an hour wherever you adjust the linkage. Mm-hmm. Then the last thing would be wide open, which all 4 of them, all 4 barrels would open into the engine.
Okay.
Then it can go back and idle at a 2-barrel again.
Right.
That's fairly easy to make it run.
So you're talking about sequentially, you're going the first part of the 4-barrel, which is
2-barrel.
Then the next 2-barrel from the other carburetor.
Yes.
And then when you're wide open, it's actually 8 barrels, right?
8 barrels, yes.
So there's 2 4-barrels wide open.
Yes.
So that moves a lot of air and fuel.
Moves a lot of air. You need a good air cleaner.
Yeah.
And a good set of exhaust.
Okay.
Yeah, you need dual exhaust, and you get that from the early cars like the Chrysler Hemi.
Yep.
Had 2 4-barrels on it, and the Chrysler, the old 1960 Ram car
Yeah, they had the Cross Ram, I think.
Yeah, the big old Cross Ram, and had big exhaust on it.
Yep.
And the Ford 428 Ford had 2 4-barrels on it.
Okay.
They run good, no problems whatsoever with them.
Okay.
Rarely did they flood over or anything.
Yep.
It was a good carburetor and
Okay.
big exhaust, and those things would go 120 miles an hour, just keep around picking up speed.
Wow.
They were really fast.
So you like the dual quad over the 3 Deuces?
Yeah, I do. The 3 2s was okay. We had some 348 Chevys when they were brand new, 61s with tri-power.
Okay.
And it was always kind of messing with them. You had a kind of a linkage between the 2 carburetors, and maybe they stick a little bit, and get the springs, return springs just right and things, and it's always a tinkering with it.
Yeah.
Tinkeritis. You'll hear that thing. And still the carburation has to be careful at 14-to-1 compression.
Okay.
Gas mixture.
Okay.
You just can't flood an engine, expect it to go anywhere.
Yeah, right.
And so, and the 4-barrel is always good, and the 2-barrel is always good too.
Yeah, okay.
But the tri-power is always something wrong with one of them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, one of them,
That
we
makes
used to
sense.
say the old Ford thing, if one or 2 of them are flooding over most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah. To go back to the Flathead, I love the Flathead with a single 4-barrel.
Is that right?
The new Edelbrock carburetor, yeah.
Okay.
It runs so good, and you get the adjustments, screw adjustments are nice, and then we can get in that carburetor without too much, get an EGR valve hooked up,
Okay.
a new breathing system, like the new cars, and it starts perfectly, and it really runs nice. Yeah.
So that leads right into the next question. Someone was asking, are certain brands of carburetors better? You mentioned Edelbrock.
Yeah.
Does it depend maybe on the engine?
Edelbrock is the old Carter carburetor,
Okay.
Carter AFB, and they bought it some time ago and changed some bolt patterns on it, so you have to buy their gaskets and some of the other things there, but it's the same concept.
Okay.
And usually the Holley carburetor was faster.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the car would go faster. You really never seen a round dirt track car with a AFB on it or Edelbrock.
Okay.
They were all Holley carburetors.
Holly.
Then you could jet one side or the other side, or one front corner different than the other front corner. And
Wait a second. So you would, okay, so this is part of racing that I don't really understand. I'm learning.
Okay.
So you would literally jet different parts of the carburetor differently.
yes, yeah, like the left front corner in our cars, we have some major carburetors here that cost a lot of money, and then sometimes we modify them and stuff, and the carburetors are maybe 11, 12, 1,400 bucks for each one. It's an alcohol carburetor.
Okay.
So even we had that to where alcohol was starting to that. Gasoline will atomize.
Right.
You can actually spray it against something and it will become a fog.
Yeah.
Alcohol won't do that.
Okay.
Well, alcohol will cling and make a rain, become a solid.
Okay.
So in our round cars, your 3/8 track and you're going around fast, then it may, with that rain clinging together and become a rain, drops, it will lean out the left front piston
Interesting.
and flood out the right rear.
Wow. So you'd overcome that by jetting them differently?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, we always took our intake manifolds and put a aluminum spacer. I cut grooves in the intake and put a spacer and divide the right side from the left side. One big hole there, there's a spacer in there. And then right away that helped that left front from
Okay.
it would suck more air.
Right.
So
right.
some of those things are important, and we could lean out that left front corner or rich it up left front corner,
Sure.
and lean out the right rear.
Uh-huh.
And then you could get the car to really run good.
Really balance it right.
Yeah, balance it right. Yeah.
Interesting. That I didn't see that one coming. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. So a lot of things on carburation. One day I should get a chart maybe and
Yeah.
draw a picture on the board and have a little carburetor class. And I do that for some of my customers over here asking me about carburetors if they come in and
Yeah.
get a piece of paper and show them what basically makes a carburetor work.
Yeah.
And I said, now you can go home and tinker with it.
Yes. Well, that was one of the questions here, so we're going to have to do that because this person was asking what are the basics of adjusting a carb, and I'm sure that is easier to show
That
on
would
a
be
chart.
totally that.
Yeah,
that would
exactly.
go into that phase, yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about symptoms. This is a good question. What are the symptoms if someone has carburetor problems? What comes to mind as being like, oh, that's a carburetor right there?
Well, a carburetor usually will affect all the cylinders.
Okay.
It won't affect one.
Okay.
So if you got a dead cylinder or something, it's got nothing to do with carburation.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So if you hear a miss or whatever.
Yeah, it's usually electrical or compression.
Right.
And carburetor is just a thing in the middle of the engine. Probably the worst thing they ever did was put a two-barrel carburetor on a V12 Lincoln. Because now you got a single two-barrel carburetor on.
Right.
It's about 18 inches to one end of the motor and 18 inches to the front.
Yep.
And without a doubt, it ain't going to run right.
And that's how they came out
That's
of the
the way
factory.
factory, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the worst thing they ever did put on a car was a carburetor.
Yep. That's
Even years and years ago.
Yeah.
And they had some updrafts like a Model A Ford, Model T Ford. The carburetor was down and it had to suck the fuel up in there, and that was okay.
Yeah.
But it was just a four-cylinder motor. But you get some of the V8s and stuff with one carburetor in the middle of it, and it wasn't a good idea.
Yeah. And you're just reminding me that our friend J.B. Donaldson, you know, he has some of those Lincoln Flathead
Yes,
12s.
he does.
And he actually created a manifold to put those three Strombergs on it.
Yes, he
for
did.
That I probably got advice from you.
And that's that motor we ran.
That's right.
Yeah, and we
We did run that.
It ran fine. Really ran really nice.
But it had the three Deuces on it.
But as far as adjustment on carburetors, there's a few things you do, and just like over the years, they sell carburetor spray to clean the carburetor.
Yep.
So the guy sprayed in his engine around top the carburetor. He took the air cleaner off and sprayed it in there, started over and ran it, and it ran much better. He didn't clean nothing in the carburetor because there's little air holes, a teeny air hole in a siphon tube.
Okay.
So the siphon tube is where the fuel goes from the flow bowl over through a passage and down through the jet and down the carburetor.
All right.
Then if you didn't want that to run so rich, because it sucked a lot of fuel, then all the carburetors have a little hole drilled in it. The bigger the hole, then the more air it took in, and the leaner the car ran until it ran perfect.
Oh.
That's one of our carburetor lessons.
Okay.
So that little hole is just underneath the air cleaner. Take the little cleaner and you see the holes right in the carburetor.
Okay.
It got dirt in it.
Oh.
And pretty soon, that hole was plugged up and it ran rich. So the normal customer didn't know anything. They say, hey, spray your carburetor, it works perfect. So he went on there and sprayed with this lacquer thinner based carburetor cleaner or whatever it was, and sprayed it, cleaned it all off, started up and ran perfect.
Yeah, he didn't know why.
He didn't know why. He thought he didn't clean the guts out of the carburetor, the jets or float bowl or anything.
Yeah, he just cleaned
so
that
was kind of cool.
That is neat.
But the customer he was happy because he bought that and it made it run.
Okay.
But he didn't know why.
Yeah. All right, just have a couple more questions for you. Next one is, are there certain carburetors that you just think are always trouble and you should avoid them?
Not really.
Okay. Usually you can adjust them and get them.
I think all of them are basically the same.
Okay.
We used to have some weird carburetors way back in the 50s. There was some carburetors that really ran good, and they got all kinds of gas mileage, and people bought them. I think they bought them maybe on J.C. Whitney or someplace.
Okay.
A Fish carburetor.
Fish.
The brand was Fish.
Okay, I never heard of it.
Yeah, and I think you could do some weird things with that carburetor, like change the butterfly size and change the venturi size.
Wow.
And stuff to make it bigger or smaller.
Wow.
It was quite a carburetor. Just a normal mechanic could take it apart and change different things. And anybody that would know anything about a Fish carburetor has got to be at least 85 years old.
Right.
But that was a carburetor that was quite common.
Okay.
And they would make a Dodge car and get super gas mileage. Other than that, there's not been much. Stromberg and, of course, the Edelbrock carburetors.
Right. Okay, so last question here, and then we're going to wrap it up. And do you prefer original carburetors or the aftermarket brands for engines these days? Or do you
I
care?
would prefer probably the original carburetor. Like a Quadrajet carburetor is a good carburetor.
Okay.
A lot of people like those, and you could buy a bigger one off of a 450, a 500-ish Cadillac car.
Okay.
A little bit bigger Venturis and stuff. And,
Uh-huh.
if they were overhauled right, and then you could drill some holes in that carburetor back so it would hold the float bowls would hold a little bit more gas.
Okay.
A couple little holes in it, and get some good repair kits and repair it right so it didn't leak so much. It was an excellent carburetor.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, even the factory car, they knew what they were doing, I guess.
Yeah, they was pretty good. Yeah,
they were pretty good. What was the name of the carburetors that Chrysler Corporation used? I'm trying to remember the name of them.
Stromberg.
Oh, that was Stromberg's.
Maybe Stromberg.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And they were a little 2-barrel carburetor. It lasts forever.
Yeah, that 97, I think. Is that right?
That was a Ford carburetor.
Oh, that was a Ford
94
one.
and
Gotcha.
Ford 97.
Yep.
97 was a little bit bigger. That was a Ford Flathead carburetor.
That's right. Right.
And they had some really weird carburetors. Some of those were like toilet bowls, in which the venturis were almost open, and the bowls on top of the carburetor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, instead of carburetors are 6 inches tall, but on top was the bowl. And the butterflies, you could see where the fuel went through. They were a weird looking carburetor, and probably some of the Mercury's, 489, maybe 50, 51, 2, 53 Ford Mercury, maybe. I don't know exactly what year.
Yeah.
Had those funny carburetors on them.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good.
It's kind of strange.
Yeah, that is strange. Yeah. I'm going to see if I can dig up any pictures of any of those things. I'll look
I'm
around.
sure you can, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ed, thank you. We're going to wrap up this episode.
Okay, good.
It's been enjoyable, and we'll look for some more questions. And thank you all for sending questions into Ed. Ed's so willing to answer them, and we love hearing the stories that go with the questions too. The answers. That's very good.
I enjoy that.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks again. We'll see you again on Barry T's Garage.